So welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is our April webinar, and we are just delighted to welcome WAPOR members and our guests, and are really excited and honored today to be able to present three researchers who are doing research in some of the most challenging spots in the world and have been doing this for a long time. And are going to be sharing with us some of their observations and experiences. And I would like to, first of all, introduce our speakers. So Johnny Held is the president and CEO of ORB International in the UK, and is our WAPOR National Representative for the United Kingdom. Munqith Dagher is, Munqith Dagher is, Munqith Dagher is our national representative from Baghdad, Iraq, and is the founder and president of the Independent Institute of Administration and Civil Society Studies in Baghdad. And Firas Kayal is the founder of the Syrian and Levant Market Compass in Syria. And Munqith is our national representative from Iraq. Firas is our national representative from Syria. And I would just like to hand this over to them to share their research with us so we have as much time as possible to hear from them. Of course, we welcome comments and questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and when we finish with the presentation, we will get to those. So would you like to take it away?
Thanks very much. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone there. Can you see that screen?
Perfect.
Cool. Okay. All right. Well, when Constanza asked me, I was delighted to offer to do this presentation, but I kind of felt a little bit of a fraud talking about Iraq and Syria without my two friends and colleagues, Munqith and Firas, because for as long as I've been working there, clearly I look at the data and we look at the focus group findings, but actually it's probably a lot of the time just talking to those two, often in coffee shops or restaurants or late at night, dare I say it, sometimes in a bar, so with Firas, that I've actually got to learn a lot more about the country and the dynamics and stuff like that. But this is really a story to some extent of like the power of research and our industry. You know, we all sort of sit back and we're all supposed to be amazed by the global distribution of Coke, or, you know, DHL can get you any package over any mountain anywhere around the world. Actually, research-wise, our industry can conduct research practically anywhere in the world. Maybe not North Korea, but other than that, it's in basically all countries around the world. And Iraq and Syria clearly have had quite a troubled history over the last 20 years. But the research that, together with my friends and colleagues, we've been carrying out is now one of the longest assessments of public opinion, if not the longest assessment of public opinion in both of those countries. And I should tell you that this is the three of us a couple of years ago in Dubai, and it really has been, it's been a great friendship. We've you know, I'd be lying if I said there haven't been a few challenges along the road. Clearly, with polling in some of these countries, if you follow a random probability sample, you know, you're knocking on doors in nasty areas of nasty towns. You don't know who's behind the door. You know, there are. I'd be lying if I said there weren't any risks involved in undertaking this research. But over the 20 years we've been doing it, we've built up, I think, a very solid process that has developed along the way. And I'll tell you briefly a little bit about that now, before I let Munqith inspire you with some of the highlights from Iraq. And then Firas we'll talk to you in length about some of the atmospherics right now in Syria. And then we'll also, just because it's topical and is of interest, talk a little bit about a poll we've done in Gaza. And that, again, is another good example of the power of this industry. We've recently been carrying out surveys inside Gaza. There are still interviewers in Gaza who are happy to or willing to undertake face-to-face surveys to essentially tell their story. Because as we know, there's a blockade, or journalists are being banned from going into Gaza. It's very difficult to tell the story of people still living on the ground. And again, that's a good example of where polling is unique. I mean, ORB, we the three of us also, yes, we're WAPOR members. We're also the Gallup International members for our countries. Munqith and I first started to work together in 2004. We met. He'd come over to London. He can tell his own story about how he did the first ever poll in Iraq. But he came over to London. We met. He met my father, and Munqith and I met. We wrote a bid for a project, and we started polling in 2004. And we've been doing it practically every month, bar 1 year since then. And then Firas, I was fortunate enough to meet in a coffee shop in Jordan, who said that he had the capability and the experience of conducting market research in Syria across all 14 governorates. Clearly, when the war happened, that stopped. But as we all know, anyone who works in conflict environments, when conflict starts, there is a need to understand public opinion and how it's changing. So he pivoted towards the kind of work we do. Everything's carried out face to face. 20 years ago, we were using, like I suspect many people on this call, pen and paper. Clearly multiple challenges with pen and paper. I mean, if we're honest, fabrication is one. Going through checkpoints, being fought with questionnaires, getting questionnaires back from remote, unsafe areas to capital cities to or large towns to data enter, etc., etc. Lots of challenges with pen and paper, but probably 9-10 years ago, we shifted everything to tablets. And obviously, those who know, the great thing about tablets, collecting data through tablets, is that you can implement, and we do implement, an integrated quality control system. So we have built our own software platform, and what that means is that when an interviewer is in Damascus, Baghdad, wherever, Raqqa, and they complete that interview on the tablet, as soon as they hit a signal, a file is sent back to us in London or in Virginia, and we are able to quality control that interview. And the things we do, we have a silent audio function, so we can listen to the questions to see whether or not they were asked properly, and there was indeed a respondent answering properly. There's an audio clip there as an example, so people listen to those on a daily basis. You can track the GPS of the interviewer. So if we've told them to go to a remote village and they fancied sitting in a coffee shop making it up somewhere else, we can find that out very easily. You can track to see whether or not they followed the random route, skipping every fifth household, etc. A series of other quality control procedures, which we've all worked very hard on implementing to ensure that the data we are collecting and analysing is honest data. I guess one question, why do we care about Iraq and Syria? I mean, you know, the war finished in Iraq many years ago. Yes, there's still an international presence, NATO, multinational forces in Iraq, and in Syria. You know, some of you probably think ISIS is dead, it's gone, or whatever. But there's still a lot of conflict going on in Syria. But clearly, sadly, with Russia, Ukraine, and other conflicts, it's probably off your radar, or more so now. But we're interested in these two countries for strategic reasons. I mean, as I said, they were kind of like the birthplaces of Al Qaeda and ISIS, who clearly pose a global security threat. And we see ISIS and Al Qaeda affiliates, whether it's in Somalia, whether it's in Nigeria, whether it's in Mali, whether it's in Bangladesh, whether it's in Pakistan, whether it's in Lebanon, wherever. There are violent extremist groups around the globe who are clearly pose a threat to the security of us lot. So that is a reason why we still look at Iraq and Syria, because we need to know whether or not support for these groups or similar groups is increasing or decreasing. Would you be willing to justify the use of violence in the name of Islam? Would you support a family member going to fight or join ISIS? Of particular relevance, it's always been relevant, but as each week passes, it seems to become more and more relevant, is that these two countries really are a core battleground in the fight that some in the West have with Iran. A lot of our Iranian directly or their proxies are operating in both of these countries. The influence they have at the very highest levels in these countries is strong and is probably increasing. Just at the weekend, the attack, or last weekend, the attack on Iran hit Israel was 1,000 or 1,200, whatever it was, missiles and drones, etc. Yeah, the majority of those drones and missiles were launched from Iran, but there were also a series of missiles that were launched from Iraq and Syria and Yemen and other places where Iran is strong. So for that reason, for the security reason, we still are very interested in the influence they have and how they are trying to shape public opinion. Clearly, there's an oil issue as well, and the great reserves of money that oil can offer. And then finally, there is a strategic importance. I mean, we're interested in it also to protect those who we have built better relationships with within the region. Clearly, like with Israel now, a lot of eyes are on Israel. If I show you the following map, this is from IISS here in London, and essentially it shows Iranian influence across the region. And what you can see, obviously, Iran's here in dark green. The green countries are those who are aligned with Iran on a scale. But you can see there, the majority of Iraq, I mean, Sunni, Baghdad, Shia, the majority of the population within Syria, living in these areas, these countries, these regimes are increasingly becoming aligned to Iran. And Iran has many proxies, we call them, operating in these countries. We're all familiar now with Hezbollah and Hamas, but there are other proxies operating in these countries, and the influence you can see. There's only two countries on the whole of this map where the risk of escalation involving non-state actors is high, which is the red. Looks like Kalashnikov. Don't know. The two countries are Iraq and Syria. So that's why we are interested in these countries, and that's why I assume you've joined into this webinar. And what I'll do now is I will pass over to my friend, Dr. Munqith, who can possibly tell you his own story, how he started, and then we'll just show you some of the highlights from the data.
Okay. Thank you, Johnny. Really interested. And welcome, and thank you for Ksenia and WAPOR for this opportunity. The trigger for me to start this business or this job as a pollster in Iraq, the trigger was or came on 2003 during the invasion, for the U.S. invasion in Iraq, and that trigger was I was hearing in the media a lot of stories and lot of interviews with Iraqi exilers and with the U.S. invader to Iraq, who said that we came to free Iraq. We are representing the real Iraqi voice, while as an Iraqi who lives for the entire of his life in Iraq, I knew that this was not the case. So, and one of the big mistakes now the U.S. confessed that they made is that they depended in their invasion on the judgment or the advice, bad advice by Iraqi exilers and by other politicians. So the same trigger is still there. The world is listening to politicians in the region, while our experience telling us that the real people on the ground, they are the one who can make the difference. The best example that I can give to you is ISIS. Recently, I and 4 of my US colleagues finished a longitudinal study on ISIS, including interviewing around 50 ISIS fighters in the prisons. I had in-depth interviews with them, and it's published now by Oxford in a book about ISIS. So the main takeaway that I got from that study is that the main reason behind this terrorist organization was not a religious reason as many might think. It's a socio-economic reasons, factors that made people join these terrorist organizations. And all research that I and Johnny and Firas did still refer to the same issue. It is there are many socio-economic factors that can affect not the countries themselves or itself, but it can affect the entire world as it is happening right now. This region is boiling. This region is still very important to the global security. It's not only about the terrorism in the region. There are many strategic points, many strategic reasons that make this region is so important. Now, 20% of the entire transportation or it goes through the seas in that region. And you can see that when Yemen decided to enter to that conflict, how it affected the entire world. You can see right now the conflict between Israel, Iran. You can see, or you saw the invasion of Iraq. Out of all wars, the Britannica encyclopedia calculated during the last 100 years, around 25% of it took place in Iraq. In Iraq, we had the highest wars rate in the entire world. Almost every 2.5 years, we have either internal or outside war. So the region is boring, and this is why it is so important not to listen only to the politicians, but also to listen to the real people, because they are the ones who make the difference in the global theater and not only the regional theater. Now, I will go with you through a few slides. And as you can see here, the first slide, which is the standard question that for all pollsters, those who say that country is moving in the right side or in the right direction. As you can see on 2004, and we are the first company that initiated a poll in Iraq during Saddam regime. Before 2003, there was no way to do any poll in Iraq, and you can imagine why it was like this. After 2003, after the occupation, we had the chance to make or to initiate the first ever poll in Iraq. Since that time, we were tracking this indicator. As you can see, there were very high expectations among Iraqis on 2004. So people think that, or thought at that time, that Iraq will become the state number 51 in United States. Iraq will be the state number 51. So they were so optimistic. 62% on 2004 say that Iraq is going in the right direction. But after that, they discovered that this is just one more occupation. So the expectations declined sharply, as you can see, till 2014, where ISIS controlled around 1/3 of Iraqi territories. And on 2016, we reached the bottom, which was only 14% who say that we are going in the right direction, because on 2016, at that time, ISIS, as I've told you, was controlling a wide areas in Iraq. Then after ISIS being defeated by Iraqis and with the help of the international community, it started to increase again. Of course, we had ups and downs, but the good thing is that recently, as you can see, since August 22, we witnessed a continuous increase in the right direction, which shows good improvement in public opinion attitudes. But we have to be very careful in interpreting these numbers. Now, the other number, thinking about a year from now, do you think that life in Iraq will be better or worse? As you can see right now, recently we have an optimistic trend going up since the last government took place. The last government is, or the current government is very supported by what they call the coordination framework, who are supported by Iran, and that's why things became calm, and there were more opportunity for the government. Also, the oil prices during the last couple of years were very high, so the income for Iraq was so high, and that's why things became or started to be show a more positive trend. Next, please. So that's why, as you can see again here, the confidence in the central government, while it was ups and downs since 2014, it has never reached the 50%, but recently it is now more than, or it reached more than 50% for the first time since 2012, which reflect the same optimistic trend due to the improvement in security, improvement in some public services. So the current government Sudani honeymoon period continuing. Everyone expected that this honeymoon will, of course, the government took place on 2021. Everyone thought that the honeymoon will finish, but the momentum is still there. A lot of money has been pumped into the country due to the oil prices, high oil prices, but nevertheless, the government is right now stuck between as I call it in the Arabic term, between the two wives, US and Iran. Right now, the Iraqi government has two wives, and it has to make them both feel good, and that's why there are a lot of compromising between the two. So as it happened the last weekend, though the Iraqi government officially they said that we are not part of that attack, yet different Iraqi militias participated in that attack. So right now there is stability, but this stability is so critical, and it's at any moment things can deteriorate sharply right now. So I think this is the last slide for me, Johnny. Oh, okay. So yeah, this can show you. So we have in Iraq a big issue or a couple of issues. Corruption. We are one of the top or one of the highest corrupted country according to international transparency. And the second thing is the militias. In Iraq, we have right now more than 100 different militias in Iraq. Around, I mean, the estimated weapons right now in Iraq it's so high, around 5 million different pieces of weapons. It's out of the control of the government. So the militia issues, and most of these militias, like more than 90%, is supported by Iran. So we have asked this question since 2021, whether armed groups are more powerful than the states. And as you can see here, the trend, always the vast majorities of Iraqis, whether they are Sunnis or Shia, of course, around 80% of these militias are Shia's militias. There are just a couple Christian militias, and the others are Sunnis, tribes, militia. So the vast majorities are supported, trained, armed by Iran. So when we ask about our groups, armed groups, whether they are more powerful than the state, as you can see, the public opinion always see that or confirm that these armed groups are really more powerful than the state. And this is why, another reason which makes me say that we have a very critical stability, and things can, especially right now with the conflict between Israel, United States at one hand, Iran at the other hand. Iraq is stuck in the middle and has to make United States feels happy, and has to make Iran also makes happy. So things, and with all these militias on the ground controlling a lot of arms, and with an empire of money. So one of these groups has now more than one of these militias has more than $1 billion estimated by the finance minister in Iraq, ex-finance minister in Iraq. So they have money, huge money. They have a lot of weapons, and they are trained, supported, coordinated by Iran. So that's the nightmare which can explode at any moment in Iraq right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Munqith. 2 wives and a militia with $1 billion is
Yes.
a recipe for disaster. Is a recipe for disaster.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, the only interesting thing, I mean, obviously in the last, as we said, like the honeymoon period is continuing. We thought it would change. So there is a bit of optimism at the beginning. But I mean, the power of having this 20-year track is that, I mean, clearly 2003 happened, de-Baathification, etc., you know, offering them democracy. Although there's optimism at the moment, it's not a it still remains an incredibly complex environment, and something we did with the BBC to mark the 20th anniversary of the invasion. You know, we still have 40% of Baghdadis who would say that within the next 10 years, if they could leave, they would leave the country. So to say it's a sort of bed of roses at the moment, despite the money being pumped back into the country, despite the sort of building of roads and hotels, etc., passing the budget for 3 years, etc., it's still very troubling. So from the land of 2 wives and militias with $1 billion, I'll hand over to my friend Firas.
Thank you, Johnny. Hi, everybody. I'm Firas from Syria. We start in Syria in social research in 1996. 2003, the first opinion poll we conducted in Syria, and we work after this until now from Syria, and we open another office in Turkey to control, because Syria is divided into three now is three area, northwest and northeast and southern, with regime, Kurd, and opposition. The main issue in Syria, I think, the non-listening to people. Where we start the crisis in Syria in 2011, the regime, he don't listening to people to make some minor change, and this issue bigger, and to many international player, and to this issue in Syria, and make divided after ISIS. He gets some area, and coalition support Kurd in northeast Syria. So we have three Syria now, finally. But the government, he don't get lesson from previously. The Kurd, he don't listening to tribals in his area. Government, he don't listening to people. Even the opposition, he don't listening the people in the opposition area, because he make government in west Syria in cooperation with Turkey, and he think the order from Turkey is most important from population in Syria. The main the check main point in crisis in Syria start from 2011. The people between earthquake and start issue in Syria. Daesh, ISIS, he come from 2012, divided by coalition from northeast Syria. And after the earthquake, the people in Syria have more optimizing because the aid he come to Syria, and the Arab world, he use earthquake humanitarian issue to open diplomatic channel with the regime. So the people, he more optimizing for situation in Syria, but speedily come back after the problem with the clash between tribals and Kurd, and regime, he come back to fight for north west Syria. So the optimizing, he decrease after this issue. Next, please. The atmosphere in Syria, in long term, everybody said Syria go to right direction, but for short term, the people, he not very optimizing. For the area controlled by SNA, Syrian National Army, the people drop it around 52, start 52, drop it to 28%, approximately. In SDF area, start 32 and drop at 2 point after the clash between tribals and SDF. In long range, the people, he said, is we will go to right direction, and this slightly increase. But in the long short wave, the people he don't very optimizing about situation in Syria. The NGO temporarist help in Syria that increase the hope for people, but as he is a fast comeback for normal situation. Clutch some area northwest is between regime and opposition. Every day there is clutch. Maybe it's not clear in the news, but the people he follows the Syrian situation, he can follow this. But because of there is more important news in the world, it's not too famous. Gaza and Ukraine is more take more news in the world, news world. But in Syria there is clutch until now in the northwest between regime and opposition. It's small clutch, but it's daily clutch. And now it's calm in the northwest Syria because the Syria Democracy Force is control, but sometimes there is some clash between tribals and Syrian Democracy Force. Next, please. Next slide. In the regime area, because it's more peaceful, in additional of the worse situation of health, education, the service, and poor situation in regime area, but the people more optimistic because the security situation is better from other area. There is no clutch in the regime area. There is iron control from the regime. So we don't. The people he's more optimistic for other area in Syria because there is no security issue. But there is many lack of service, poor and Syrian lira lost the situation comparing with other currency. So the poor in the regime area is and service is more worth of all the other part in Syria. For example, northwest Syria, the service he come from Turkey is better from the regime area. SDF area, Syrian Democracy Force is better because they have help from coalition, but because the security situation is not suitable like regime area, the people most less optimistic from other area. Yes, Johnny. Next, please. In Gaza, I think we'll come back to Munqith in Iraq.
Okay. Thank you, Firas. Johnny and I can talk about this. This is a survey that we have conducted just a couple of weeks after 7th of October, while things were still unknown what will be the situation. We were the first group who jumped in to understand what's going on there in Gaza, and it was a survey that has been conducted in 6 countries, including Palestine, in two areas in Palestine. One inside Gaza, and during the interviews we were, we were contacting our interviewers, and we heard the bombs and all the screaming, and it was so difficult to conduct it, but we did it. Thanks for our staff there and in the West Bank as well. And these are some of the results that we have presented in Washington and in different media outlets. The idea was to understand not only how Gaza's people feels, but also how Arabs are feeling towards this conflict and this hostile attack against civilians in general. So as you can see here, who to blame? Israel, US, and the West held responsible about this. So as you can see, the vast majority of Iraqis, this is in Iraq, but we have different numbers from other countries as well, showing the same. Most people are blaming Israel, USA, and the West in general. The credibility, if there is one conclusion from that poll, is that the US and the West in general, they lost the heart and mind battle, and the ones who really won it was not only Hamas, but Iran was the big winner. China, Russia, they have been perceived as a good partners for Arab and good defender for Arab civilians who have been under attack. Yeah, next.
Yeah. So like when we asked them straight out whether or not they supported the military operation launched by Hamas on October the 7th, you can see both in Iraq, almost a majority, and in Syria, 50-50, you know, there was support amongst the population for that attack. The view from focus groups in Palestine, I remember, was, well, we've been under attack from Israel for decades. It only seems right that we go back and attack them. And you can, as difficult as that is to believe or to swallow sometimes, you can understand it to some extent. I think on the Munqith just mentioned there, Russia, China, and America. I mean, there is clearly a threat to world order at the moment. You know, as a 53-year-old, you know, I grew up thinking America was the world's police, and basically the biggest country in the world that everyone looked to. Clearly now, China originally economically, now to some extent the security space also, but also Russia are making great advances in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, and across the globe, and seeking to challenge that world order. In Iraq specifically, Iraqis have a very complex relationship with the West and with the US. We always used to track the question, when would you like multinational forces to leave your country? When you ask a similar question in Northern Ireland, I think the Catholics would have said, right, get the British Army out tomorrow. But in Iraq, it was never tomorrow. It was sort of 6 months, reluctantly, or 9 months. They know that their security, to some extent, is dependent on the US. And there's this great battle going on right now between what the Prime Minister says and perhaps what he actually believes about international forces still influencing the security of the country going forward. But what we can also see, having tracked it over months, is actually support for Russia having more of a global role is rising. And in these countries, in many countries in Africa, focus groups tell us that people respect a tough leader. They like the tough man who's seeking to go in and protect his own people. In many countries, bizarrely perhaps, but post the invasion of Ukraine, actually support for Russia has increased, and actually the activities, the influence operations, the way they are targeting people and their communication efforts are increasing in a number of these countries. The only thing that has sort of remained constant in the work we do in Iraq is that despite the grip that Iran has on the country and the influence it has to the very, very top within Baghdad, and the investments it's placed in the media sector over the decade, perceptions that Iran is a global power or favorability towards Iran in Iraq are still low, even amongst the Shia population. Slightly different situation certainly in northeast Syria that Firas was talking about. Nationally, I mean, a lot more likely to have more favorable views towards Russia, China, and Iran. Nationally, Syrians would want to foster closer relationships with these countries than, say, France or the EU or the UK or the US. But in the most recent areas of conflict where ISIS were headquartered in Syria, in Raqqa and Dagher and places like that in the northeast, actually America remains the preferred partner. And actually support from them has only increased since October the 7th. So a different picture on international actors within Syria, and then Syria versus Iraq. So I think we talked for probably long enough. Everyone else is awake with any questions. I guess we can take them now.
We would like to encourage you to either put questions in the chat or in the Q&A, or raise a hand. We would love to have any thoughts or feedback. I wonder if I might begin by asking a little bit, and I wonder if you could address this both in Iraq and Syria, but I want to touch back a little bit to the methods and just how challenging is it to cover the entire country, and how does that change over time? I can think of places where it might just be too risky, too dangerous, too impossible to get interviewers in. And how does, sort of, how do you manage with that, and how do you handle the sort of issues of where you're able to cover might change from one time to another?
May I answer this? Yeah, may I answer this? I mean, yes, it's very difficult, it's very tough. It's not an ordinary or usual polling practices. For me, for instance, I have lost 3 of my interviewers who have been beheaded. I can say that the most of my interviewers, who are hundreds of interviewers, most of them has been or has visited the prison or the jail or the detainees for at least once in their during their job. They are stuck between the militias, the government, the troops, etc. Always accused by working as a spy against their country. Anyhow, it's very difficult, but it's something that you learn by practice. And it's evolving, and the more years that you have, the more techniques that you develop to be able to cover the entire region. But the key issue is to be a local citizen from the same culture, to understand the culture, to understand different dialects, different languages, different cultures, even subcultures in the region, to have or to build also a respected name, independent name, known that you are not affiliated with any party, to have very, very, very good training, excellent training to your interviewers, to use the edge of technology in the industry. All these things, it's a combination of different issues. But as I've told you, for me, the most important thing is to be from the same culture, from the same. I mean, that's why I wonder how some companies, some big companies, claim that they are working in these regions without understanding the different difficulties. For instance, let me give you one example. One of these example is how to be able to interview females, and how to be able to enter to the houses, while at the same time the level of interest in others is less than 10% who trust others. So these are very important issues that you have to understand it and to develop some techniques to deal with it. So that's my answer to it. Firas, if you have something.
For Syria, as Munqith he said, the most important is localization of interviewer, and not local for governorate, but is on the scale of sometime for small area, because even in Syria we are still not Iraq. Iraq maybe now he don't have war. We are still in the war. Even the war is in frozen, but we have in war. So we have checkpoint in each neighborhood. So the people in our field team, it should know the natural of checkpoint in the neighborhood. Of course, it's like Iraq. It should be culture, familiar with local culture, in the small village or small town, even it changed from, for example, in northwest Syria, there is difference between North El Furat or South El Furat culture. So our team, it should be from this local area. Of course, we get general approval from the three most control government, the Statistic Bureau in Damascus, in northwest for populations and organization administration, and the same in south north west. But after this, it should not any useful in the field, because in the field we need approval from smaller checkpoint in the area. That's we conducted. Actually, of course, like Munqith said, we use last edge of technology. We use the copy tablet, and we have everyday control for the tablet. If we have problem, we close the survey for the tablet for one interviewer or something. And all this, it's not make we don't without work without problem. Every project we have some issue, like people interviewer he arrested, but we arrange to release as soon as possible, and he left sometime 1 hour 2 hour arrest in checkpoint. And when we communicate, and we have lawyer and contact person area in each area, so we solve this issue.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add to that is, yeah, absolutely, you got to have local interviewers from the local area who are familiar with the culture. You've got to have the national permits and licenses, but you've also got to have relationships. You've got to have relationships with the people who control the particular neighborhood. So that means practically you need to have relationships in Syria with basically Assad regime, with HTS, with what was the Syrian National Army, with the FS, the Free Syrian Army, etc. And I remember, it must have been 2013 or 14, we were doing a lot of work in Gaziantep in the southern of Turkey, close to the border with Syria. And I'd asked one of the guys, well, how do you get permission in Raqqa? At that point, ISIS were at their height in Raqqa. He said, I'll go and see the head of ISIS in the area. And he said, you think it's some gun-wielding, black-bearded, crazy bloke with guns everywhere? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, no. He said, look, the guy came in. Obviously, the guy who went to see him was from that area. You can make connections. And the ISIS chief said at the time, you can come in and you can interview people in this area, but there's two. You cannot take a video camera, wasn't it? You can't take pictures. You can't take a video camera. You don't want any media organizations in this area. And then also, we think that actually when you interview people will say actually life is better under ISIS than it was previously under the regime. Sure enough, he was right. In the early days, support and approval ratings were higher in those areas than they were in other areas. They were smart people. They knew the importance of gathering public opinion. And I think Claire's got a question.
Yes, Claire does.
Yes. First, to say that I'm quite impressed of what you're doing. I have a combined question. One is, I remember being very impressed by Munqith doing a pause in Mosul some time ago, and at that time he used the telephone to do the pause. So my first question is, why don't you use the telephone to do to carry your polls? And second question, are you afraid that, you know, if you have local people interviewing local people, there's going to be some social desirability where people may be even more afraid to say what they think because it can be a neighbor or somebody they know or in the large family or whatever?
I think for telephone, I think I believe the face-to-face he make more trustable for the people when
Yeah.
we ask sensitive or political question or yeah we have experience with Gati in Syria. The refusal rate is around 85%. Every 10 attempts, we have one answer.
Yeah.
And face-to-face is around 30%. We have response rate is around 30%. So the face-to-face is built more trustable with our team in field. Yeah.
And in Iraq, we have the same experience. Of course, Claire, we always prefer to go with F2F interviews instead of telephone. The survey that you refer to it in Mosul in telephone, I did it at that time for two reasons. Because at that time, ISIS still there in the first stage. It was just 3 or 4 days, as I recall, after ISIS took over Mosul. So the situation was not clear. I was in a hurry to get the result because I had a trip to Washington and I wanted to present some data from there. The security situation on the ground was not clear for me, so I didn't want to risk to put my interviewers under risk. So I decided to go with the telephone survey for these reasons, and I asked just 3 or 4 questions at that time. It was the first poll about ISIS. But after that, I started to use different methodologies. At one stage, I used snowballing, but it was face-to-face snowballing, of course. And then at other stage, I used different methodologies. But in general, in an area with a very, very low level of trust between people, you cannot work with the telephone. It's very difficult because people does not trust who is on the other side of the line, especially if you are asking such sensitive questions that Johnny always wants us to ask, or other clients always wants us to ask. Very, very, very sensitive questions about whether the ISIS or about the government, about militias, about different issues. So the telephone is not preferred there, and as Firas said, that's why the refusal rate is so high. And for the face-to-face interviews, because I can see on the Q&A there is a question about the rates, the interviews rates there in Iraq. It's around between 70 to 80%. we have a response rate of 70 to 80%. But when it comes to telephone, it's dropped down to less than 10%.
Same for Syria. It's around 70% response rate. In telephone is it's 20%. Claire, sorry, we are waiting. Claire, welcome.
Thanks a lot for this information. Really, it's very informative. Thanks a lot.
There's another question that asks, in addition to telephone and response rates, asks about online surveys. Just what are your thoughts about challenges or possibilities for using online surveys?
Well, again, it's the same issue. First of all, we have very high illiteracy rate. So in Iraq, for instance, the illiteracy rate is 24%. And if we take this in account, plus that mostly 65%, 65 years old and above are not using online. So you have more than 30% or 1/3 of your statistical framework or your sample framework is out of your reach. This is one reason. The other thing is that some areas does have a good coverage of the or good penetration rate for internet, but other areas does not have the same penetration rate. So you always end up with a very biased sample. And then it comes the issue of the trust. Who can trust others? We all know the rumors in the region, in a region where the conspiracy theory is so popular among people. So who is asking you these questions online? Whether these can be ISIS people who are very well known as using online recruitment, or are these governmental? Are these intelligence services from your government? Who are those people who are asking these sensitive questions? So that's why neither online. Again, I read and hear about online surveys, about telephone surveys, but as someone who has been in that industry right now for 22 years, I can assure that the quality will be very, very poor.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's the same in Syria. I think, listen, if I was asking how frequently people drink Coke or buy Gillette, maybe that's one thing, but also, in countries where there are 9, 10, 11 active intelligence forces going around picking up people off the streets for the wrong views or whatever, there's retribution going on in many of these countries. I remember years ago, was it in Basra, people were being arrested or killed practically for their name for identifying as a Sunni. I think to ask the kind of questions we want to ask online, listen, it's quicker, it's cheaper. We get it in the UK, we get it in Western Europe, we get it in the US. Panels are very, very mature. There are, millions of people on it, or you can do random recruitment to those panels. But the topic and the sensitivity of the topic, we don't undertake online in those countries.
So we have a question from Colin Irwin, who is asking, thanks for the great work, which we've had a lot of comments with that. Do you think more transparency in publication could help international understanding with better decision making?
Yeah, this maybe Johnny, he can answer, because most of our work, I think, for clients, so we cannot publish everything. For example, in this PowerPoint, we canceled some
data from I mean, the majority of the data, Colin. I mean, the majority of the data, as you know, is undertaken by clients for their own reasons. Is the world a better place by having more awareness of public opinion? Yeah, absolutely. You know, in your own experiences in Northern Ireland with the peace process, the importance of public opinion, and reassuring, confirming, denying, whatever, hypotheses that certain stakeholders who are very close to particular issues hold. So yeah, I mean, I do think more transparency would be good, but unfortunately, there are. I mean, there's Arab Barometer. There's the World Values Survey. There are annual surveys, very good surveys that are released, which I'm sure a lot of you read and participate with in. But a lot of this stuff, unfortunately, is kept private.
May I jump in here?
Sorry.
Sorry, may I jump in here? I will strongly support what Colin said, that yes, the more transparency will help, not globally, but also internally, locally. One of the most difficult obstacle that we face during our field work is a lot of suspicious about our work, about what are you doing with these data. So that's why we have created, I mean, I'm talking about my experience in Iraq. So we have created a lot of free of charge products that we present maybe on monthly basis in the media. We conduct some workshops. For instance, I have a product which we call IOT, Iraqi Opinion Thermometer, where we measure different indicators toward democracy, toward religion, and we publish it. This is very helpful. But as you know, these are very costly efforts, and we can do it once, twice, as we did the Gaza survey. We can do it voluntarily one, twice, 3 times, but unfortunately, there are not a lot of organizations who fund public surveys. Mostly they want to keep the data or the data for themselves. So I support having more data published, but it's not always under our control.
Thank you. We have a question from Ellen Lust, and it goes back to this issue of social desirability, but it follows up with the question, to what extent should we be concerned? That answers even to questions about things like who's responsible for Gaza and so forth are seen as demonstrating political allegiances, which may be very dangerous in low trust, highly contentious circumstances. Do people trust face-to-face enumerators or believe them to not maintain confidentiality? Might that be seen by specific people, factions? How do you address that?
Well, social desirability is another very important factor affecting our work, especially in our region. Why especially in our region? We are a collective societies. And in collective societies, or according to my theory with my colleague Michelle Galvin from Stanford, we are in tight societies, very tight societies. These tight societies, the opinions of the others, the opinions of the society is so important, so affecting our opinion. So we usually go with the societal trend according. So if we know that something is desirable, socially desirable, we will go with it. Yet, I would very much like, and I am right now thinking, and maybe this will be a good platform to discuss it, or to at least to provoke some ideas about it. A study about measuring what is the percent of social desirability in our work. I mean, I cannot, I've been now thinking about this for a couple of months, but how to measure, I'm 100% sure that social desirability is so important, is so affecting our results, but how much it affects our results or our data, this is something that I think maybe WAPOR can do some research, a group of researchers who can develop a technique to, or a way to measure this social desirability factor. That is a call for WAPOR, maybe. I don't know.
It is this question of public opinion versus private opinion. Does it exist equally in all places, or is it sort of societally conditioned, or vary in different settings? Yeah. Just any other questions?
I'm sorry, I was going to say there's a comparison also now in Russia, where I mean, maybe it's been taken to the next level. But so if you look at the polls that are published, you've got anywhere between about 65 and 80% of the population saying they support the special military operation in the Ukraine. But obviously, if you don't support the special military operation in the Ukraine and you tell people about that and you go out on the street with a banner, then penal code, whatever it is, 264, 284, I can't remember, can put you in a gulag for 10 years for doing that. So there is, but our argument is also, it is always, there are the two things we look at. So using a mixed methods approach is definitely advisable in these kind of environments, because after half an hour, people will start talking to you very directly about, and they may support it fully, the special military operation, or they may not. But then also, if you undertake, factor and cluster analysis, and you do segmentations, then you can really understand what percentage of the population are hardcore supporters or followers of something, and the different sort of groups, clusters of people on a particular issue. So although the headline 70% of the Russian population may support the special military operation, you know that within that 70%, there is a big percentage that, let's just call them soft, and a percentage that are hard and nailed on. So you have to do your multivariate analysis to basically understand the strength of that sentiment on an issue like that.
So I think Claire has a hand again on this.
Yes, this time to follow up on Munqith's question. I tried to see that for example, for polls in Russia, often people would say, you cannot trust these polls because, in Russia, they will not answer rightfully what they think and all things like that. So my point here was a way to see that would be restricted variance. Like everybody saying the same means restricted variance. So I checked that for 150 countries on satisfaction with democracy, and the country where there is less variance is Denmark. okay? Because they all agree that they live in a very democratic country. So, and we didn't have that in Russia. The second point is you should go see on the Levada Center website. The director, Denis Volkov, has a very, very interesting article where he explains all the methods they use to check whether there was social desirability in their polls. And really, it is scientifically very interesting.
And
Thank you.
maybe following up on
Thank
some
you.
these methods, Ellen Lust has one question about a specific thing I see used increasingly in political science, a list experiment, or some of these other randomized response techniques, sort of an audio CAPI perhaps, but list experiments or other things. Have you tried using those, seen those used?
No, is a short answer. We haven't. I think as Munqith pointed out earlier on, and the same with Firas, we're happy and content that the best way of pulling data on the subjects we want to understand is face to face.
Yeah.
Face to face and random route.
Yeah.
Very
We
good.
make random starting point, random route, and cache grade selection of the household respondent. We try to use random as
Within the questionnaires in the sample, any attempts to use some of these new novel, tell me the number of things in this group versus that group experimentally, or those just things that haven't sort of.
No, we've not been asked to do that at the moment. It's interesting that I'm aware of other people, a couple of providers who operate through apps, who are selling their services into governments. And you're an individual, you sign up to this app and you get paid to interview some people or to collect some photos. Actually, the times when I've actually looked at the data, one in particular survey from Nigeria that claimed a ridiculously high during COVID vaccine uptake. Actually, when you looked at the sample that they'd drawn, there were like 1% of the population were aged over the age of 48. There was a massive disproportion in the sample towards large urban areas. And if you honestly believe, which I'm sure we all do, this is WAPOR after all, that your data is as good as the sample in which it's drawn, I know it's boring, but let's stick to what we know is right.
And with that, we've hit the clock, but I would really, really like to thank all of you for this fascinating presentation. It has just been wonderful. Thanks to all of our guests and visitors for the great discussion, and Constanza, although she's been quiet here, is probably the best connected person I know in the world of public opinion, and helped us tremendously put this all together. But I'd like to thank our speakers, Constanza, Ksenia, for handling the logistics, and all of you for your attention and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for everybody. Thank you for everybody. Bye. Thank you. Bye, Johnny.
Bye, Constanza.